before I share my screen, there are a couple of my colleagues who've joined me on the call today. April is having some tech issues at the moment, so she's going to be joining us hopefully in a few minutes. And we've got Flo, who is from Arup. So, Flo, did you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm Flo Mansfield. I sit in the climate change team at Arup. Arup have been working with BAFTA for a number of years now on different programs, but most recently this one, developing the scorecard. So we kind of do the kind of technical development and then actually kind of going through the scorecards and helping work out all the credits. So I'll be talking through the scorecard today. Also, just to say, I'm in the office and it is getting noisy. So if it's too loud, just say, and I'll move to somewhere else. But I wanted my big screens in front of me. Just let me know. Nice to see you all.
Uh, Thank you very much. Okay, let me just share my screen. Sorry, bear with me one second. I'm just trying to get it onto the presenter view. And it's not working. Is um is that big enough for everyone? Can you all see the screen okay?
I
Florence?
think that's fine. Yeah,
Yeah,
Victoria,
okay.
that's fine. Yeah, it's good.
Amazing, fantastic. Um, so as I said before, welcome to the webinar for the Studio Sustainability Standard. It's going to be a webinar and a Q&A session at the end. So today's session, we're going to cover what is the Studio Standard, what the benefits are, and some joining information. Then Flo's going to take us through the scorecard walkthrough, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end. So firstly, what is the Studio Sustainability Standard? So it's a voluntary standard that's been created by the industry for the industry. It's the world's first sustainability assessment for studio spaces, and it's designed in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We are in our third year right now, so it's very exciting for us. So we've got some really, really clear objectives to provide clear signposting to studio stakeholders on critical priorities, to provide a common rulebook for progressive studios, and to accelerate the adoption of best practice in line with our BAFTA Albert Climate Action Blueprint, and also to support studios with their reporting requirements. So the standard itself is structured around six themes that represent the core sustainability principles relevant to producing content. And these themes are underpinned by data that we collect across all of them. So the themes that we explore first are climate, which looks at our climate resilience, and circularity, that asks about the studio's approach to waste materials and circularity. We have a nature theme that looks across green spaces and how we improve resilience and our connection to nature. Our people theme looks at the effort studios are making towards the well-being of their people, and management, how studios approach governance, training, and sustainability performance improvement. So, as we know, climate and biodiversity are not distinct issues. So, both of these are woven throughout all of these themes. And as I say, they're underpinned by the data that we collect also. So, looking at the benefits of joining, I'm not going to go through all of these. There's lots on the website, but I've just highlighted some of the purple ones that sort of jump out to me. So, the studio standard is really flexible and it enables different performance entry levels. So, it doesn't matter if you're at the very, very start of your sustainability journey or if you're partway through, you can join in the studio standard. And it also takes into account different studio types and geographic locations, because as we know, no two studios are exactly the same. We also provide external recognition via our industry recognized logo. And it provides a clear pathway to align with net zero legislation and current reporting processes. But there's lots of other benefits as well, but they're just the ones that I feel I'd like to mention. I'm just letting some more people in, bear with me. Fantastic. They're just going, we're just going through the list. Okay, fantastic. We've just had a load more people join. So thank you very much and welcome to the webinar. We are recording it. So although we've started, you will be able to go back and see the first few minutes of this. So looking at joining, hopefully you all should have received your invites to the portal, which is our SharePoint area where we will be able to share lots of information with you. So once you're set up in the SharePoint area, you will then gain access to your individual studio folder where you can upload all of your evidence and your scorecard. So I've sent you all accesses. If anybody's screen when they log in doesn't look like this, let me know and I'll make sure that you that we can help you get onto that portal. So we've also updated the scorecard this year to make it a lot more user friendly, and we took lots of feedback from participants from previous years. So we have updated some of the advice also that we give, and we have added in a question, but Flo's going to go through those scorecard questions with you. But hopefully it should be a lot more user-friendly this year. And just to give you an example, down on the right-hand side is the logo that we issued last year. So there will be something very similar for this year also. So I'm going to pass over to Flo now, who's going to talk through the scorecard KPIs. Thanks, Flo.
Great. Thanks, Victoria. Yes, so I think for this section, we're just going to walk through each of the tabs that you can find in the scorecard, and I'll just explain the information that you input, try and answer any questions. We've had questions come through, so I'll respond to them kind of as I'm describing it. As Victoria said, at the end, we have a Q&A session, so if there's anything specific that comes up, we can talk that through in more detail at the end. So to start with studio details, so essentially pretty straightforward. The ask is if you can input this as accurately as possible using the metrics or units that are on this, that are in the drop down for you to select. Obviously on the left-hand side, it's all the details about the studio. Moving over to the right-hand side, this is where we just want to understand exactly how many productions you've had in the studio in the year that you're reporting. It says production names. Please feel free just to put 1, 2, 3, 4, because I understand productions don't necessarily want to be named in that. And then for production type, there's a sort of definition list below this screenshot that sort of list out types that you can select. And that's just for our analysis at the end, basically, so we can understand what kind of productions are happening and we can try and look at, emissions compared to types of productions and things like that. The total number of shooting days, again, is really important. We do a metric at the end where we look at emissions per shooting day across all studios. So a kind of accurate figure around that is great. And then also the studio spaces and areas as well. So again, this just enables us to look down to that next level of analysis. There's a similar list of descriptions for the studio space. So you should be able to see that and then apply that to your studio quite easily. The studio scorecard feedback, very straightforward, just any thoughts and feelings you have about the standard. As Victoria said, we really take those on board, and obviously having more studios this year, there's going to be new opinions and comments. So really keen to hear what you think about the usability. Next slide, please. Thank you. So then on the introduction, so there's just a description about the scorecard, and just take a read of this before you start filling it out. Sort of explains the structure and the format, and also the 5 different categories that Victoria went through before. The Q&A record, again, really simple. Just enter the dates, the reporting period that you're covering, and the person who filled it out. It's just a record for us going forward, and obviously useful when a studio goes on to do it multiple years. Just a reminder that so you select your reporting period, the 12 months that you want to report across. The information that you then go on to fill out in the scorecard, it's really important that that reflects what was actually happening in that period, not what you're doing now or what you've done since that period, but within that period itself. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this is then the scoring dashboard. So this will show you, calculates your score as you fill in the scorecard, and it's sort of summarized here. So you can see your score for obviously each of the categories, and you can see what that means in terms of your overall score. I will go on later to talk about scoring in detail because I know that's important. Also, just a reminder to please let me know if it is too loud in the background, but I'll continue for now. Um, and yeah, so I'll go on to do scoring later, but this basically is just a summary dashboard, so you can keep checking back and seeing what what your score is totaling to as you fill out the scorecard. Great. So this is obviously what each of the tabs look like. So this is just an example of the climate one. We have the category on the left-hand side. So each of the 5 chapters, so looking at climate now, we'll have a number of different categories that we want to explore. So for example, energy demand management. We then have a number of different reference credits to achieve across each of these. The available score, again, actually, I'm going to pause on that and come back to it at the end when I've gone through the scoring section. But essentially, you've got 2 columns dictating the scoring, and then you've got your KPI. So what this KPI is asking for. The white columns are the important ones. So that's where we need studios to input information. So the first one, you edit that. There's a drop down selection that you choose. So you pick the answer that you feel is applicable to you. And then the next column along, this is really important. So the studio notes, and this is a narrative that basically demonstrates why you feel you've given yourself that score. And this is really important for us because we use that going through in our QA process to understand whether we feel like that does give the studio the credit or whether it doesn't. And in cases where that is left blank or it doesn't have sufficient information, it just makes things really, really hard for us. And in some cases, we can't give the credit because we just can't justify that we've got the information there. So if it's relatively straightforward, just bang in a short sentence. If you're not sure about the credit, just provide as much information as you can, and then that enables us to make a decision on our end. So then in addition to this, so that's what you enter into the scorecard, you've obviously then got the evidence that you submit and obviously into the link that Victoria provides. And in that column, evidence required, that's where we describe the kind of evidence we need to support this credit. So please obviously provide that where you have it available. The 2 then purple columns, credit scored and excellence achieved. I'll come back to them. They're part of the scoring and you can see what you're getting. And then on the right is all the references, so where things have come from, and in some cases, potentially additional information. So if something isn't clear, please have a read of that before kind of going back to Victoria, the questions, because hopefully your questions should be answered in there. Thanks, Victoria. Okay, cool. So going on to the actual first topic, climate. I'm just going to follow this on my slides down here as well. So we're going to go through each one. There are obviously a lot of different KPIs, and so I'm going to whiz through them quite quickly. I'll pause on ones that tend to have sort of studios tend to have questions about. But obviously then at the end, if there's any if you want to go into more detail or ask more questions, we absolutely can do. But I'll sort of canter through them. Otherwise, it is a long, long time of me talking. So in our first section under climate, we've got energy demand management. So obviously just managing the amount of energy that's consumed in the studio. First one, studio efficient house lighting. So this is the lighting that is used outside of sound stages in kind of workshops and canteens and things like that. So it's a proportion of installed capacity of studio house lighting that is LED. So a proportion kilowatt hours of LED compared to the total kilowatt hours. Second one is in that soundstage lighting. So again, a proportion, kilowatt hours, proportion of LED lighting compared to total lighting. The third one is then the lighting, LED lighting that is rented for productions to use for shooting. And this is asking for whether this is provided by the studio or via a third-party approved supplier list. Now, the highlighted bit at the end is and production's incentivized to use a service is something that comes up a lot, and it's highlighted a lot in this deck going forward. We provide a list of ways to incentivize. So I think the list we've got in the scorecard, which you'll be able to see, is contractual incentives slash regulatory frameworks, recognition through Albert's Sustainable Production Certification, financial incentives, and access and enhancement of supplementary services. So access to additional resources to support the production sustainability goals. This is not an exhaustive list. If there are other ways that you feel you encourage productions to use the supplies that you recommend, that's fine. As long as you contain that material in the narrative, then we can look at that and say, yes, that's fine, that gets the point, or not. But it's really important. It's not just about having a supply list, but you're actually encouraging production, sorry, to look at it and select a supplier from that list. That's what the credit is trying to get to. So then back to the list. So EDO for house system controllability. So systems including lighting, heating, aircon are time controlled and set to basically shut down automatically when they're not in use. Heat recovery, all studio house ventilation systems, including heat recovery and/or economizers. The energy generation, so first one, production on-site generation. Productions use house power only, so no generators are used, or more than 75% of production generation uses biofuel, electricity, or green hydrogen. Studio on-site generation, so studios use house power only, or again, production generation uses, sorry, more than 75% of production generation uses biofuel, electricity, or green hydrogen. Service to production, so studios provide a third party or approved supply list for renewable fuel generators or batteries for production use. And again, productions are incentivized to adopt these green generator suppliers. EGO for zero emission ready. So this means that there's no gas on site. The studio doesn't use any gas boilers or anything like that, that the facility is all electric. On-site renewable electricity generation. So do you have any solar panels or wind turbines that generate electricity that can contribute to your overall consumption? I just saw, sorry, was then mixed fuel renewable electricity tariff. So these two, EGO6 and EGO7, sometimes cause a bit of confusion. So essentially, a mixed fuel renewable electricity tariff is one that is purchased from a sort of general energy supplier, and it's requested that they use 100% REGOs. So it's a renewable tariff dictated by the government's level of renewable energy. And that provider has given you a tariff which only uses REGOs. That is different then from the next one, EGO7, which is 100% high quality renewable electricity tariff. And this means going to a specific renewable energy provider. I think a number of them have been quoted, Good Energy and others, where they specifically only buy 100% renewable electricity and source that to you. So different things, and it basically results in a different carbon factor being used when calculating the emissions from your electricity. The first one will have a DEFRA carbon factor, and the second one will just have zero. Then the last one, energy. Carbon offsets. So any residual carbon emissions are offset through a recognized scheme. So again, some studios find this difficult because they have a no carbon offsets rule, because carbon offsets are controversial and generally not encouraged. The reason why we've included this is to allow studios who have not begun necessarily their journey yet. And carbon offsets is a tool that can be used on a decarbonisation journey. And therefore, it enables them to get a credit where other studios who are beyond that and say no to carbon offsets will go on to achieve a lot more. So you're only dropping 1 point if you have that policy. And it's not a point that stops you, reaching a higher level of score or anything like that. But that's why it's in there. Thanks, Victoria. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, then moving on to energy demand management. So these first two, EWMO1 and 2, are about submetering so that you can calculate accurately both the water and the energy used for different areas on the studio. So submetering. The next one is then all about water management, so trying to minimize the amount of water used on studio site. First one is about low flow fittings. The second one is about detecting leaks and obviously your water pipe network. And then the third one is water recycling. The next section is about transport emissions, so T01 EV charging. This one relates to more than 5% of car parking spaces have EV charging provisions on site. O2 service to production studio maintains and approves supplier list of trailer providers. Um, and again, incentivizes productions to use this list of trailer providers. Third one, studio provides access to zero emission slash low emission vehicles via third party providers for use by employees. So obviously this would include EVs, hybrid vehicles and car share enabling, things like that. This last one, climate resilience, again, one that comes up a lot. So the majority of the scorecard relates to mitigating emissions, so trying to reduce the amount of emissions you create. This is the only section that relates to adaptation, so climate resilience, where we're looking at what can we do to try and reduce the impact of climate change on our studios. So it's really important to include this, even in just kind of these two credits. So what they ask for is a climate resilience plan and then a climate impact plan. So the first one means that you have to get a climate change risk assessment. So it looks at the weather patterns within the specific site area and what potentially is going to happen because of that, e.g. flooding or high temperatures and what, the impact that's going to have on the studio. The second part then is creating a mitigation plan to try and avoid sort of try and I guess mitigate the bad outcomes of these things. So we split it into two so that we can enable studios to break it down and attempt one before attempting the other. Next slide, please. Okay, so on to circularity, which is the next topic. So waste management first. There's a couple of different waste management ones that relate to studio and productions separately. Waste management one, waste contractor provides regular data on total waste volumes and recycling rate for both general and construction waste. So this is really important to enable tracking, and also in the data tab later on in the framework, we ask for figures for waste. So you need to have a waste contractor that's obviously providing you with that information. O2 relates to the waste streams, so a minimum of 3 segregated recyclable waste streams, including recycling and composting in offices as a minimum, are collected on site and available for the studio site. O3, studio management of production waste. So again, sort of stepping into the production space. Either production waste is handled by the studio waste contractor, or production waste contractor provides an equivalent level of service and reports as per breakdown. So again, it's just trying to ensure that there's some sort of oversight over production waste as well as studio waste, and that you can report this as well. Um, O4 is site-wide recycling rate for studios, including compostable, is more than 60%. Studio O5, studio food waste collection, segregated collection of food waste from an all commercial cooking and site-wide for composting by waste contractor. And then O6, studio zero waste to landfill, site-wide policy in place for zero waste to landfill, and incentivizes productions to adhere to this policy. So they're pretty straightforward, either kind of yes or no questions. Moving on to the next section. So this then is all about the procurement of materials on site. So studio materials have a procurement policy and procedures in place covering all construction materials. Again, either kind of a yes or no. CMO2, studio sustainably sourced timber. So it achieves the 100% FSC certification. Um, Again, services to production. So provision of an approved list of for sustainable suppliers / procurement for materials for construction materials for sets for productions to utilize and incentivizes productions to use this service. The CM04 then relates again to the timber. So studio incentivizes productions to achieve that level of certification for the timber that they have on site. And then CM05 is VOC content, all paints and solvents used by operator controlled spaces to have a maximum of 50 grams per litre VOC content. So this one we've made a bit of a distinction this year with a difference between film studios and broadcast studios, because I think broadcast studios it's not possible yet. There isn't that kind of paint available. So if a film studio applies, and if it's broadcast studio, it doesn't. Thank you. So carrying on with circularity, there's a lot of them. So I was trying to sort of keep them relatively brief, but RPCO1, service to productions, so that there is you have to provide a third-party suppliers list to facilitate the reuse and renting for productions. Again, it incentivizes the use of this. Same again, but with prop reuse for productions and incentivizing them to use it. That there is a local charity list for productions to donate and reuse props, and this is made aware, the productions are made aware of this. And then provision of rental of services for sort of more white goods, so things that are relevant to the office space and the kitchen spaces. And then provision of rental services for specific appliances as well. So again, these are all a kind of yes, no. Do you provide those lists to productions and do you incentivize them to use it? The zero single-use plastic, again, is quite straightforward. So is there a zero single-use plastics in studios? This we do treat quite strictly. It has to be a complete zero single-use plastics policy across the whole site, and that has to be enforced by the studio. And then for the suppliers, again, it's do they use suppliers that adhere to single-use plastic? This one, just to note, is relevant for suppliers who are providing plastic goods. So, for example, a timber supplier doesn't need to have a zero single-use plastic policy because they're providing timber to you and they probably don't have one. And then O3, drinking water, so provision of water fountains. Again, yes, yes or no. Next slide, please. So moving on to nature. So the first section of nature is about responsible food. So does the studio have schemes and initiatives to promote healthy, ethical, seasonal, plant-based food options across all site catering? O2 is provision of sustainable site catering services or a list of approved suppliers and productions incentivized to use them. Number three then is food donations. So does the studio provide sort of donate food or catering surplus? The green space one is again something that came up. There are a few questions from last year. So this again is a percentage. So the proportion of the site area that is green space or soft landscaping. And then the second part is biodiverse green space. So the proportion of the site area that is biodiverse green space. And we have a definition in there of what that means. Obviously, for some studios, it's difficult for them to create green space if they don't have it. And so the credit actually allows you can get the credit if you sort of encourage people to use it. You provide maps and you make people aware that green space is near the site, or generally spaces that encourage well-being for people to use. Next slide, please. Great. Okay. So then this one is, as Victoria said, all about the people that use the site. So the first section is well-being. So do you have mental health programs and policies in place? Are there mental health first aiders on site? WO3, childcare provision for studios. So either this can be something on site that you offer, so childcare services, or it can be supporting people to find that nearby, so making them aware of potential services. There could be an internal childcare voucher scheme, but this might not be applicable. And then amenities provision for studio and production staff, so other wellbeing amenities on site, just to make every day easier, showers, lockers, things like that. Active travel, so are you promoting walking and cycling? The first credit applies to sort of segregated walking routes on site that are accessible and inclusive. And then ATO2 refers to cycle parking, so making sure that there's parking places provided and showers and changing facilities to encourage people to use bikes. Community outreach then is about looking outside of the studio into the community. Are there, COM01, educational outreach and placements, the provision of educational outreach and school placements by the studio for people to come in. Skills and employment measures in place to ensure productions are able to provide and engage with outreach employment opportunities to the local community, particularly for the hard to reach or vulnerable. O3 is community investment, so investments into community schemes and programs to support local development. So these might overlap with some of the health and safety things that a studio does as well. So hopefully should be quite straightforward to complete. The last one, inclusive design. So do you have an inclusive design strategy? And we've listed out the kind of relevant aspects of that you should include. Is there equality, diversity, inclusion training for all studio employees? And is there ongoing conversation and feedback loop with end users of the building? So this you can sort of detail in the narrative if you have that in place. How long is that feedback loop? How often do you consult people and review information and then feedback to people? Thanks, Victoria. Okay, and then finally, management, which is sort of more when we talk about ESG, it's sort of the governance side of things. So, do you have targets in place to improve sustainability performance? And within that, is there a monitoring and review process on whether these targets are being met? Sustainable supply chain management. So, is there a sustainability criteria included in supply chain selection processes? So, looking at your suppliers and whether they achieve certain environmental certifications or other things within that policy. Studio sustainability training for all studio employees. So within this, you could list out the training that takes place. Same credit again, but for production specifically. So what training do you offer to productions? Um, Sustainable behaviours, initiatives in place to promote sustainable behaviours amongst employees, staff, and the wider community. So again, this could be sort of nudge behaviour, change management, anything that you have around the site to encourage people to behave in a more sustainable manner. Partnerships in place with local, regional, and global bodies to support delivery of sustainability outcomes. This could be with us studios as well, either nationally or locally. And then the last one, MO7, so independent insurance and assurance and verification. So this asks that the data that you've included within this year's scorecard has undergone an audit process by a third party to basically assure that it's right. I know this one can be quite challenging for studios as well. That obviously comes at a cost having a third body doing that, but we sort of see it as best practice when reporting in sustainability frameworks. Great. So the Victoria went through the 5 topics as I've just gone through. So all of these, you're entering information that earns you a credit or not. The top bar that goes across the top is all about the data input then. So this allows us to understand the total impact of the studio across a number of different topics, but then also we use carbon factors to convert that into total emissions for that studio for that year. Obviously, then looking across all the studios that submit, we can see a kind of total across the studios. So it's really important and valuable for us. It also allows us to track between different years' progress. Um, this, if you don't mind going on to the next one. Okay, great. So this is the scoring. So the way that it works is that one of the most important things is filling in the data tab, as I said. So this is quantitative inputs, so saying total amount of energy, total amount of waste, and there are a certain amount of mandatory data inputs that you have to include to be able to unlock and go above just participated. So you'll see in the top table on the left, we have participated, which means you get above 50% in your total score, but to go above that, you need to have got 100% in the mandatory data score. So make sure that you included, ooh, it's gone black. So make sure that, oh, there it is, it's back again. So make sure that you've included all the data that's mandatory, and then obviously anything above that is great. There's lots of things to complete on that side. And like I said, that just enables us to calculate total impact and calculate the emissions. Do you mind going on to the next slide? Sorry, Victoria, just back to the scoring one. Yeah. So what I will say is that there's no credit associated with the quantities. It's whether you fill in a figure for that KPI or not on the data sheet. So if you have a very high, say, energy reading, that doesn't mean that you get any more or less scores. It's just whether you're able to fill that in with a figure that is correct. So if you've got 100% of your mandatory data scores, you're then able to increase your credits and go up from participated to pass, good, very good, depending on what you've filled out in your 5 different categories. So your climate, your circularity, your nature, those ones. Within that, there are credits that you have to get to unlock excellent and outstanding. So there are certain credits that if you're not able to do that, you will be capped at very good. So your score could come back as a total of 85, but you will still only receive very good if you haven't been able to unlock those. And that's because we see them as being, really important for a studio to focus on, and something that for us to give the credit of excellent or outstanding, those need to be done. What I will say, so just on the right-hand table, so you can see we've got our 5 sections and then the data reporting. In the second column, it shows the weighting. So these different categories carry different weightings with them. You can see the one at the top, climate, has 35. And this is because we deem this just to be the most critical, the most important, the work in there. And therefore, we just believe that it needs a higher rating. Climate action is obviously incredibly pressing, and I think the kind of the KPIs within the climate section have the most direct impact on emissions, and so therefore are given the higher weighting. So you will see if you go back to your dashboard tab, it will look just like this table, and you will see that your total number of credits are listed for each of the categories. They're obviously times them by the weighting, and that gives you your total score across the scorecard. Thank you. So I think I'm handing back over to Victoria.
Yeah, thanks so much, Flo. There's
No worries.
so much information there. That's great. But just a reminder to everybody, we are recording this session. So you will be able to spin back to the sections that you need and just review that advice that we've been given there by Flo. So there's just a few key reminders that I wanted to talk about. On the rate card that has been sent out, the price we base on studio square footage of the shooting stages or the studio space. So it's not the total area of the entire studio facility, it's just those shooting areas. Please remember that you do only have one chance to apply for your assessment, and all of the submissions must be final and complete by the deadline, which is the 29th of November 2024 for this year. So a complete submission will look like your complete scorecard and all of the evidence uploaded. So all of the narrative sections of the scorecard are to be filled out with enough detail so that we can justify awarding the points on those sections. Narrative is so important. As Flo said to us, please tell us as much as you possibly can. We go through a QA process where we agree whether or not you get the points. So look carefully at the wording of those questions and tailor your answer around it, so that it's really easy and obvious for us to see, yes, we can award you those points. And NA, if there's anything that's not applicable, just writing NA, it won't count anything towards your score. So please don't leave any of the sections blank. If stuff doesn't apply to you, then please just tell us why. You don't need to go into chapter and verse, but just a quick sentence or two to tell us why will be really, really helpful for us to understand from your perspective. If as you're filling out the scorecards or collecting your evidence, if you've got any questions at all, please email studiostandard@bafta.org, and we will do all that we possibly can to help you. I'm actually just going to stop sharing my screen here. We'll go into the Q&A section very shortly, but before we do, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's recently filled out our survey regarding the future cadence of the award. April has been able to join us on the call. April, I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add around that.
Sorry, everybody. I don't know if you can hear Frank Sinatra in the background.
No, you're okay. You're fine.
It's been at an event. Yes, so thank you for filling out the survey. So we heard the feedback on various accounts, and we are taking that on board. There was resounding feedback regarding the biannual assessment. And so we agree that we can implement that. And so what we'll be doing is finalizing a few different points operationally as to how that's going to look and sharing that after this meeting by email. But essentially, what we would be looking at is keeping the group of studios together in an interim year. So following on from this assessment period into the next year, looking at ways that we can reconvene. A lot of the feedback was around the value of learning and sharing best practice between all the different studios and determining, new ways of working as well. So best practices, that needs to actually go further. So we've heard that. And so operationally, we're looking at how we might do that. So we'd love to hear your feedback and ideas. Apologies, it's hard to hear myself even. Victoria, am I missing anything out?
No,
we will. There's one more thing I was going to highlight. Yeah, I think that's it for now. I think what we'll do is we'll share some additional details. But if anybody has any feedback or any comments, I'm happy to take those and answer any questions at the moment.
Amazing. Thanks, April. So we'll go into a Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, please pop them into the chat. We'll fire off with Joffy. Thanks for joining us, Joffy. So we've got a question here around if certain points are not relevant to a studio, if there's no availability in the region / not applicable to the studio, as they don't provide the service, will they simply lose out on the point, or will the total amount of points be decreased? Flo, do you want to answer that one as you were going through the scoring?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, this has come up a number of times. And I think what I would say is that it varies on a case by case basis. So there is some, for example, the generator credit where we say, do you have the no generators on site? Some studios say, well, this isn't applicable to us because we never have them on site. It's just not the way we work. In that case, we would award the credit. In other cases, we deem it that, the studio doesn't do that at the moment, but could do in the future, and therefore it's something to work towards. And so we don't award the credit. I think my advice would be just to include, as we said, as much information as you can in the narrative. And then we, in our QA process, can kind of decide either way. And if it's just not applicable, then generally we award the credit to the KPI.
Lovely, thank you. Does that make sense, Joffy?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Fabulous. You've got another question there as well around climate change risk assessments. And they're really expensive. Do we have any guidelines? Which ones do we accept? Any preferred providers? And it's not a mandatory question, right?
Yeah, so they are expensive. I think they vary in price depending on what organization you're working with. We have provided a list of organizations before to other studios, so we could do that again, of different sort of scale of companies that do them. It's not a mandatory question, so if you got everything else on the scorecard and not that, you could still get the highest level. But I think it's really important for us to have it in there. Just as I said, it's kind of the only credit that speaks to adaptation. And so it's an important part of a sustainability study.
Thanks, Flo. Flo, would you be able to possibly just clarify some points on EGO 6 and EGO 7?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see the question in the chat from Tom.
No, I can. So what I would say is that I think the issue is that we report both market-based and location-based, and in that case, the location-based isn't 0. I think that I would want to refer back. So Stephen, as you know, in our team is kind of the energy expert, and I'd want to refer back on some of the specifics in the question, and just get a proper answer back to you after the session, if that's okay. But that would be my understanding.
Lovely. And we've got a question around list of companies, but I think we have that can do independent assurance audits. I think we've probably covered that, haven't we, in the previous question there?
Yeah.
There's a question here around free training provided by Albert. Is there a minimum? Is for a minimum of 10 people. Is there a training course for smaller numbers? So I don't know if everybody saw, but last week we launched our Albert Academy last Wednesday, which is very exciting. We've got a whole new suite of offerings around our training, so please check that out. So we have got bespoke workshops that look at that are targeted towards specific departments. However, there is one that anybody can do, and you can get a link to that through our website, and that's for the screen skills training. That's available 24/7. You just need to create a login for screen skills and you'll be able to take that course, which is available for a year, and then it will ask you to renew after that. The next question is, we don't tend to provide a list of suppliers to productions as the productions decide who they want to use. Could we use the Wales-wide generic lists provided by Wales Screen for this purpose?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So I guess one of the things to say is that we understand in most cases that productions decide who they want to use. I guess what we're trying to achieve with this standard is allowing or encouraging studios to have more influence over who they choose because they're operating on their site, and ultimately we want them to move towards using more sustainable suppliers. So we're trying to kind of shift that. I think that supplying a list, the one that you've said, I think as long as it's got sustainable, relevant suppliers on it, I think the important thing is, again, just to say that it's about influencing the productions to use it because you can supply a list and it won't do it. I think as you just added, going, but it's encouraging them to use it somehow that is going to make the difference.
Thank you. Just around the training question, April has just popped a link in the chat to the Albert Academy. So please check that out there. And April, I didn't know if it would be possible for you just to clarify what you were saying about the studio standard around the 2 years instead of one.
Yes, I try. Apologies. It's very, very loud here. So studio standard, the dates. So what we're looking at, yes, it would be, we talked about doing exactly 2 years, but potentially we might do it slightly earlier so that the intake potentially would be then this, not a full 2 years, but more like a year and a half, and then restructuring it because it's been a fairly quick turnaround. So it would allow us to bring on new studios that have never participated a little bit sooner without having quite so big a gap, as this is the first time we've done it. But as I say, operationally speaking, we just need to iron out a few of those details. But we do want to be able to let studios know as soon as possible that it will be the intention to have a longer period in between the now and the next intake. Does that make sense? And I also wanted to highlight, as a question really for the group, regarding to the Albert Academy training. So one of the trainings we'll be offering is Sustainability Champion training that is accredited by the Carbon Literacy Project. And that's a 1-day course aimed at helping people within organizations to be able to have enough knowledge and skills around climate change and the impacts, but also sustainable production and climate content and storytelling kind of in a full program. I would just be curious if anybody would be interested in having a cohort offered specifically to studios, which we could potentially organize if you have people within your studios that would want to attend with other people that work for studios. It's not something that we have like planned in, but we could definitely do that.
Fabulous. Thank you, April. Just got another question here from Joffy. So will productions get the total carbon footprint based on the data section you calculated? If they do, are they encouraged to use it publicly?
Yeah, so the data that's input relates to scope 1 and scope 2. So you absolutely get at the end in the report that you receive, and there's a breakdown of how we've calculated that. And I would say absolutely encourage to use it publicly if they want to. If Victoria agrees with that, I think, yeah, supply chain is obviously a different thing, and the scorecard doesn't account for that yet.
Lovely, thank you. Does anyone have any more questions for us? I haven't got anything coming in. So there's a few comments on here. Tom, we will obviously come back to you separately on your question there. But if anybody does have, as I say, if anyone does have any questions as they're going through, please just contact us and we can assist you. And also you can look back through this recording as well. That's taken significantly less time than I thought it would, actually. But thank you all so much for your time. Good luck with the process. It's submission of the 29th of November this year, so there's still a few weeks to go, although this year feels like it's absolutely racing towards the end. So if no one's got any more questions, then I will say goodbye to you and thank you so much for joining.